We, the people called Methodists, have been asking a question. What is the way forward? Is there a way forward? We have prepared, we have wondered, and we have combed through the options, and none of this has given us new insight. Because this isn't a new question. When the people chosen of God who sat exiled from their promised land recorded their origin story that we call Genesis, it was this same question that they were trying to answer. How did we get here, and is there a way forward? The flaming swords make it clear there is no way back. We ask in these turbulent times, is there still good news? Under the barrage of bad news, governmental ineptitude, volatile weather stocks and personalities, bans, walls, holding facilities full of children, and continued exclusion. Can there still be good news? Who can evangelize me? All that was called good and very good tells of the good news that something insists on life in this world, a world begun in a garden. And so we think, yes, there might be a way forward. We are inspired by the gorgeous strains of the mysterious, glorious opening of our human story, full of hope. And we take up our hope for a way forward and plant it in carefully cultivated ground, our world from our point of view, and we watch it sprout. We resolve to live with compassion and hope for the promised land when our truth will mature and blossom. While double digging the northwest corner of our field, we notice that on the other side of the border, in the distance, there is a tractor plowing violently through the fragile earth, allowing the soil to blow away to rocky ground. The trouble with the hoped-for promised land is that it seems like it must be pure, protected, and peaceful. If they don't understand that, since they don't do it that way, since they believe this, perhaps there's no way forward together. If they would just listen and understand and change. The way forward sometimes finds you ankle deep in a field of your own cultivation, but mostly it doesn't. Mostly it asks us, like the writers of Colossians, to bear with one another and forgive each other, and above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. It isn't elegant or sexy. It is patient and kind. It is forgiving. It is loving. And love is that which binds us together in harmony. Now, we have come to an impasse. With our companion-planted heirloom, self-seeding world to our right, and some manufactured commercial GMO stuff to our left. And we despair. There just cannot be a way forward. There is an idea in mathematics called incommensurability, meaning having no common standard of measurement. Sometimes there are people with whom we share no common standard of measurement. We do not agree. Our worlds are incommensurable. But we as Methodists are asking a question, is there a way forward together? Sometimes the only way forward is to allow that which can never be reconciled, the garden fork and the tractor, to inhabit the same space, a boundary area, not in the name of toleration or squishy, we are all right in our own way. In fact, I do not suggest that the way of the tractor is correct. My 6-year-old double dug our garden with me last year, and before that my husband did. One year, a gang of my brother-in-law's friends came over, and they were double digging their yard before they knew it, and we can only describe them as the tractor type. But as the light of the day faded, they looked with satisfaction at the 3 tiny rows we had managed to turn the slow way. Committing to conflict means committing to inhabiting this difficult space for 1 more minute or 5 more minutes. What if the way forward can only be cultivated when those of us who can commit to inhabiting the borderlands? What if it is only when we bring everything we know, believe, and hope for and heap them onto these hinterlands and let them rot? Let them be digested. Let them become compost. Committing to conflict is difficult, uncomfortable, and requires strict adherence to the rules of this boundary space. We have had enough violence. As a mother of small children and a human myself, I know that no one ever changes because someone yelled the loudest. There is never a point at which child A changes his or her mind because child B yelled in just the right way. It has never happened. Committing to conflict requires work. It requires that we listen deeply. It insists that we understand what we bring to the conversation. It requires that when we fail, we try again. Composting is a kind of deconstruction of the ragged remains of what has nourished us up until this point, and it now gets broken down by time and germs. The philosopher Hegel urges us to be dissatisfied with our immediate understanding of our experiences. He insists that we engage with the process of becoming, of allowing our stinking garbage to become black gold, the glorious soil that is the result of months of microbial labor. And how is this done? By encountering the other through holy listening. Committing to conflict requires that we come willing to face ourselves, knowing that sometimes the only way we can see ourselves is when we ask the other, the tractor other, who do you see in me? The ideal, the promised land, is loaded with hope of what might be when and what should be if. But what if hope is not what compels us to believe in the promised land? What if hope is what keeps us from realizing that this is the promised land? This boundary land where incompatible worlds scuff up against each other. This might be the promised land where through our seeking and wrestling, a way forward arises. Grace is not found when you get to the promised land. Grace makes it all into promised land. And that doesn't mean it all feels promising. Conflict is difficult. But we who can are asked to step into these borderlands knowing that grace is sufficient, but not overly concerned with your comfort. When Colossians calls for forgiveness, the writers, Paul and Timothy, did not mean that in a cheap way. Paul at least understood what it meant to require deep forgiveness, he having cast so many first stones. And the love they describe is said to bind together, not loosely clasp, not gently suggest, but bind, as muscle and tendon bind together bone. This is living strong, living tough, living in grace. While at last year's national gathering of the Missional Wisdom Foundation, we were discussing the way forward. And my husband, Lingle, said that we should create spaces where we all gather around a table and really get to know each other and call it the actual way forward. And that idea became a book. And that book teaches small groups to encounter difficult dialogue in a healthy way around a table. Do we want a way forward? Do we believe that there is something worth committing to? Can we commit to sitting down around a table with those with whom we do not agree and allow the grit and grind of conflict to give birth to a way forward? This is no hero's journey, no glorious battle to win. This is a commitment to the tattered remains of an ideal. This is fighting against injustice and listening deeply to those with whom you have nothing in common. This is being willing to inhabit the strip of land between your world and the other's world. Not in toleration or acquiescence. Some things are wrong. Tractors do cause soil erosion. Fertilizers do run into our waterways, and pesticides do kill pollinators, which will kill us. But if we inhabit echo chambers, we run the risk of growing insipid monocultures, which is also bad. It is time to plant carefully, sow carefully, tend carefully, and uproot our fences and dump them into the compost bin, letting them rot, letting them become. Soren Kierkegaard wrote a parable in his book, Works of Love, and it goes something like this. There were two artists. One was greatly renowned across the whole world. And he said, I have traveled much and seen much in the world, but I have sought in vain to find a face worth painting. I have found no face with such perfection of beauty that I could make up my mind to paint it. In every face, I have seen one or another little fault. Therefore, I seek in vain. The other artist said, well, I do not pretend to be a great artist. Neither have I traveled in foreign lands. But remaining in the little circle with which I gather, I have not come across a face so insignificant or full of faults that I could not discern in it a more beautiful side, and therefore discover something glorious. Would it not be sad if love should be only a curse because its demand could make it evident that none of us is worth loving, instead of love's being recognized precisely by its loving enough to be able to love all of us? The way forward into grace is not winning an argument. It is allowing yourself to be seen and seeing the other. The way forward is not changing someone's mind. It is allowing those with whom you disagree to become real through the mysterious work of love. To walk forward into grace is to stand between those who wound and those who are wounded, able to call out each by name, because we have allowed the slow motion of love to bind us together. We have sat at the table long enough to learn the deep name of the other so that we may call them forward and be called forward by them, called toward grace. Insisting that the peace of Christ which rules in our hearts is that to which we were called in the one body. To take up the task of committing to conflict must also be to commit to the ridiculous work of grace. The way forward into grace is no mystical pathway to some promised land where we will be at peace in an ideal goodness. The way forward is giving motion to the grace found in the now. Noticing, acting, loving, and forgiving again and again and again. For this is what courage is. To say yes, knowing that you have been here before and will be here again. To take up what is yours to do today, now, simply, unimpressively. The way forward is not to double down on our doctrine. It is to allow our doctrines to rot and to be digested and to become compost. And that compost can turn rocky ground into soil, slowly, at the pace of patient seasons. Amen.